Welcome to the Imagineering Education Podcast. This is Thomas Riddle. Thanks for joining us for conversations held at the crossroads of education and design, with a healthy dose of inspiration from Disney's Imagineers. Each week, we feature pertinent commentary on relevant issues and informative interviews with leaders and practitioners from the fields of education, design, entertainment, and more. On this week's episode, we're joined by Joyce J. Krebs, a veteran teacher with 27 years of experience teaching high school family and consumer science courses, with 24 of those years serving at Triway High School in Wooster, Ohio. Jay also serves as the advisor for Triway's Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, and as a member of her school district's STEAM team that brings together teachers from various schools and grade levels in order to foster collaborative efforts to improve teaching and learning within the community. She's a highly creative, outside-the-box thinker who merges her passions for learning and pop culture in inspiring ways. To that end, Jay was one of the first members of Star Wars in the Classroom's global professional learning network, the Rogues, and is an active podcaster who's been a contributor to the Coffee with Kenobi podcast and is currently co-host on Podcast Stardust. Besides all this, Jay and I have been friends for several years now, and I'm very excited to have her on the show. So, Jay, thanks for joining us.
Well, hello, Thomas. That was quite the introduction, and I'm so excited to be here. I can't even tell you. I've been looking forward to this, and I'm so glad that we were finally able to work it out and talk about some Imagineering education.
Absolutely. So we usually start with people's stories on here because we love storytelling. And so I'd like for you to share with us your story about how you became a teacher. So what was your inspiration?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share. I've always wanted to be a teacher, and that's something that I aspired to since I was a very, very small girl. And because realistically, Wonder Woman was my other choice, and that kind of went out the window real quick. But, she was actually one of my role models for strength and whatnot. But I always had to be the teacher when we played school. And so it was just one of those things that I started at Kent State University right after high school. And I actually started as a French education major, and I loved it, but I found myself becoming a little bit disenamored with the way that I was being taught to be a French teacher. And so ironically, my then boyfriend's sister at the time, who then is now my sister-in-law, she was a family consumer sciences teacher at The Ohio State University, and she would come home on the weekends and she would bring home her projects. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so much fun. This is what I was meant to do. I've always been a creative person. My mom was a seamstress. She taught me to sew when I was 8 years old. And I've just always found a way to be crafty and work with my hands. And I just thought this is the perfect thing for me. Besides that, and just bringing a sense of life skills to kids just seemed like my calling. And so changed my major, and voila, as they say, the rest is history.
That's cool. Thanks for sharing that story. And it's awesome to hear that you were inspired by someone else's projects that you were seeing. And, it makes a lot of sense too now, Jay, hearing that your mom was a seamstress and you started sewing when you were 8, because what you guys may not know about Jay is that she's a pretty cool cosplayer. She has some amazing costumes that she has put together that I've been able to see posted over the years, and some that I've seen her use or break out at Star Wars Celebration. And so that's a really cool use of that talent. The thing I like about that too, Jay, is your cosplaying is doing that for volunteering with community events. So do you get to do that very often?
Yes, actually, it's been such a wonderful opportunity for me. And my most recent cosplay that I've been working on is Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, Star Wars, the Clone Wars seasons, basically 3 through 6. And so I've had the opportunity to volunteer at a couple of local library events. And most recently, I've volunteered a couple of times at a place downtown where I live called Operation Fandom. And they are a vintage toy store. And so I helped them with their 1-year anniversary celebration. And then I also volunteered. We have this celebration right before the start of the Christmas season in Worcester called window wonderland. I almost messed that up. Window wonderland. And so the whole community comes out. And so I was standing outside in 36-degree weather last November, dressed as Ahsoka. But it's so incredibly rewarding to see the fans come out, to see the kids come out, and just try to give a little bit of joy back to those people that know and love the saga.
Well, that's what it's all about, really, right? Is doing it for the fans and doing it to inspire the imagination of other people. And, I learned to sew in my home ec class. It wasn't called Family and Consumer Sciences back then. It was called Home Economics.
Right.
And in 7th grade, that's where I learned to sew. I learned just enough to make a couple of stuffed animals and to sew buttons on and darn socks if I needed to, but I never continued to the point where I could do what you're doing. But, going back to what I said about learning to sew in my home ec class, I took home ec in 7th grade and I took it again in 8th grade. And really, it was wonderful. I can still remember my two teachers, Miss Kinder in 7th grade, and in 8th grade was Miss Beecham. And I learned so much that was so practical. Unfortunately, what I've discovered is that as an administrator, I've seen too many times that across the nation, we're seeing family and consumer science classes where learning skills like this disappear. Has that been your experience too? Have you noticed that as a practitioner?
Overall, nationwide, I do feel that there has been a lot of programs that have kind of fallen by the wayside in favor of, I'm not quite sure how to put it, more academic subjects, I guess is the way that I want to go with that. But I honestly, Thomas, I feel that the pendulum is starting to swing back in the other direction.
Awesome.
And part of that is the whole STEAM initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And people are starting to understand, as you said, critical thinking and practical learning and hands-on education is never going to take the place of anything in our lives that's more important. And especially with what we've been going through with dealing with COVID-19 and the coronavirus,
right,
people are starting to get back to basics. Some of the biggest Google searches over that time from, that fateful day in March where basically the entire country shut down,
right,
to now has been things like how to bake a cake, how to sew on a button, how to, all of these practical skills that you're talking about. And people are thirsting for that education now. So I'm really hoping that the value of that education is going to start to come back into the forefront. And thankfully, in the area where I live, it's cherished. So I'm very, very fortunate in that way. I'm very supported by my school district. I'm very supported by my community. And I think part of that too is because I am such an advocate for it, and I'm such a believer in it. And I think that my kids really do learn more than just, what to do with flour or sugar or, even some of these other things that I teach as well, because I do everything from financial education, college and career readiness, the textiles we mentioned, and all of it has that real life element to it. So I feel that, and I don't want to throw other subjects under the bus by saying this, of course, because every piece of education is important, but no kid walks out of my room saying, when am I ever going to use this again?
You just reminded me of something. I learned to make a budget for the first time in my 7th grade home ec class. We had to look at the sales ads in the newspaper, and we were given a finite amount of money to spend, and we had to plan meals for like a week, and we had to use that, we had to look for sales and then do the math that was involved and see how much money we could save over the course of that week so that we'd have extra money at the end of the week. Practical application, as you said. Kudos to you for being such an advocate, and I'm excited to hear that we're starting to see a resurgence of that. Now, let me ask you this. Do you guys have a comprehensive high school where you teach like voc ed also in the school, or do you have a career center in the community where they learn voc ed?
We have a career center. So our students who start at the high school, it's a 9 to 12 high school. And so they have 9th and 10th grade basically to decide if they want to stay on the traditional high school track or if they want to go on to the Career Center. And our Career Center is extremely amazing. I've been out there quite a few times to see the different types of things that they have for the kids out there. And realistically, it's a great option. There are so many careers that need those hands-on vocations. And right now, there's a great video that I show my kids, and it's basically called Success in the New Economy. I don't know if you've seen this one.
No, I'm not.
But essentially, it goes into the idea that in our society, for every one career that has a degree that's beyond a bachelor's, so a master's degree, that type of thing, there are 2 careers that have a bachelor's degree, and there are actually 7 careers that have hands-on technical skill type training. So realistically, when they look at where to go after high school, it doesn't always have to be college for kids. And I think that that's something that these kids need to realize more and more, is that it's hard for them. I talk to kids all the time, and seniors especially, and they're not asked, what do you want to do after high school? They're asked, where do you want to go to college?
Right.
And I really think that's an unfair question, because college is awesome as an option, but it's definitely not for everyone.
Absolutely agree. And, I'm a huge fan of the gap year as well. We're asking kids at 18 to figure out what they want to do for the rest of their life, or to, what they want to do at least for the next 4 years. Right. Mm-hmm. And I've seen personally in our own family, the benefit of taking some time off before you make that decision. And so the other thing I'm very excited about is to see the resurgence and interest in the trades. And, I got to give it to Mike Rowe. God bless him. Mike is, if no one's familiar with, or if you're not familiar with Mike, he's the host of the show Dirty Jobs, is how he kind of mm-hmm. came into being known. But Mike has been almost a one-man army out there promoting the skilled trades industries, for asking kids to, or encouraging kids and even adults to go back to school to learn the trades, because that's a dying art form. We've put so many people towards that, or push so many people towards that college track, like you're talking about, that we have fewer electricians, fewer plumbers, fewer carpenters, and we need these essential skills. And so it's exciting to see that people are starting to value those trades again. Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys, how you did that in your school district, because if you are in a community that has a vocational education center, career center, then if you have kids that are of school age, highly encourage you to check that out, because there's a lot of great opportunities for them there.
Absolutely. And you mentioned Mike Rowe. Ironically, I was just talking about this in my college and career readiness class the other day, because there's a foundation that he had put forth called Mike Rowe Works.
Yes.
And it's all about giving scholarships to kids that want to go into the trades. And it's amazing. He has his SWEAT Foundation. It's SWEAT, and it's an acronym. I can't exactly remember what the letters stand for right now. But it is truly amazing, because there's so many kids that go into, after college, they call them gray collar jobs, where these kids get these degrees and then they can't use them for whatever it was that they got the degree in. So then, they may have majored in accounting, but they're actually, working as a receptionist or whatever. So there's such a disjointed, kind of thing between where kids want to be and where they end up. And so, yeah, I think that those blue collar jobs, those trade jobs are something that is definitely worth working at, because you look at the pay scales, and a lot of times the kids look and they say, okay, I want to be an office manager or something, let's just say. And they look at the, Bureau of Labor Statistics, and yeah, it says that they could earn $63,000 as a median income. And maybe they, quote unquote, only earn $37,000 as an electrician. But if you're a very skilled electrician, but not such a skilled manager, you really can make more money doing the other job. And that's what kids need to realize, is that employers want to pay for people that know what they're doing, they have a passion for what they're doing, and have the skills.
Absolutely. And, this is something that you have to really be willing to put in the sweat equity, right?
Right.
And that's okay. It's easy for us as parents who love our kids as teachers who really want the best for our kids to sometimes paint the world as we used to see it or as it used to be, and not as it currently is when it comes to job opportunities. And I think what you're doing and what the Mike Rowe Foundation is doing, encouraging kids to look into practical skills that can be amazing careers, is excellent. What I'll do too, thanks for mentioning that, I'll put a link to that, to Mike Rowe's Foundation in the show notes here for anyone who may be interested. And also, Jay, you mentioned that video that you showed to your class. What was the name of that video again, and how is it available?
It's called Success in the New Economy. And actually, you can just look for it on YouTube. I was actually shown the original video at a teacher in service about 6 or 7 years ago. And there is an updated version that just came out, I believe, last year. So it will be interesting to me, though, to see how these statistics may be changing in the age of COVID as well. And that's one of the things that I actually had my kids do in career and college readiness is I assigned them different topics about college planning, college life, careers in general. And I had them research how COVID has actually affected each one of those areas. And it's been pretty amazing to see the kind of research that they've come back with. And I've learned a lot from it as well.
Mm-hmm. And that's great because that's practical application right there for the kids. That's a real world learning assignment for anyone who doesn't know what one looks like. So I'm glad you gave your kids that opportunity. You know, speaking of COVID, we've had to have a lot of pivots in the education field since this all started, like as you said, kind of last March. And we've had to have a lot of creative problem solving, if you will. We've really had to kind of Imagineer what we're doing as a profession. And, you know, off air, you and I were talking before this, you've had to re-Imagineer your classroom in many ways this year, especially because you're teaching such a hands-on curriculum. And now we're in this current season where we can't have that. So can you share with us some of the ways that you tapped into your creativity to reimagine what your class could be like?
Absolutely. So obviously with the idea that I teach foods and nutrition, normally my kids would be able to do foods labs in class where we would practice different skills, practical skills, food science skills, that type of thing. And obviously this year we just can't do that. And a lot of that depends upon where we are for a risk level in our county where I live. And so you talk about pivoting, there's days where if our county level goes to a high risk, the kids can't even share anything between them. Like they wouldn't be able to even pass a whisk back and forth. So in lieu of that, what I decided was instead of making these kids have the unknown every single day and say that, oh yeah, we were supposed to cook today, but sorry, you know, we're under a high risk level, so we're not going to be able to do that. What I decided to do instead was, okay, we're going to close the foods labs this year for cooperative learning, unfortunately. But what I am going to do is I'm going to reach out to everyone that I know in the community, and I'm going to network as much as I possibly can. And I'm going to see what I can do to try to get these experiences home to the kids. So what I've been doing is I've been reaching out to various entities, one being our local grocery store here in our community that has been amazing at giving me and donating to me some produce that I can demonstrate for the kids and actually very carefully individually box up samples so they can remove their masks 6 feet apart and try samples and then put them back on again. But I've been putting together take-home bags. So with the help of my superintendent, as well as places like Ohio Pork, Certified Angus Beef, the American Egg Board, and lots of community donations, I have put together bags for the kids to take home. And what they're doing is they have simple kitchen equipment in them. So things like whisks and tongs and meat thermometers. And then I'm currently putting together a second take-home bag with basic staple dry ingredients that I can send home with them. I can demonstrate in class, and then they can actually turn around and go home and perform these labs at home. Some of the labs that I will show them will end up being optional just because I may not be able to send certain perishable food items home with them. for obvious reasons, but there will be a lot of other things that I will be able to do. And actually today I just videotaped myself doing an entire demonstration on how to measure all of their baking ingredients, as well as a lot of food science elements that goes along with it. And so that's going to be going up on my YouTube channel. So that way they can have that interactive piece, and they're going to be making Flipgrid videos of themselves doing things at home and hopefully serving their families too.
So what's been the kids' response from this so far?
They love it. They were so happy. Friday was the day that they got their first set of equipment, and I still have things rolling in, and I'm hoping to get more. I've been reaching out and thinking, oh, I can do this, and oh, I can do that. I have a local beekeeper who's going to be giving us a virtual tour of his apiary and giving them some local honey. So it just keeps going and going. So I've been extremely blessed with all of this. But, they were sitting there with their bags, and it was really just like Christmas morning, and they're pulling things out. And I had a Google form that they had to check off everything as they went to make sure that I didn't miss anything in their bag. And so I even had kids, because I have my own school Instagram. So I had kids that I had in previous years saying, why didn't we get a take-home bag? And I just said, well, you got to do it in school.
That's such a great example of how we can make the most of a challenging situation. And it also demonstrates to kids, that just because you're knocked down doesn't mean you have to stay down. Showing resiliency, showing determination, demonstrating grit, modeling these things for the students. This is what we want our kids to have, these qualities we want them to have. And I think you're doing an outstanding job with that, Jay. So kudos to you for adapting like that and reimagining what you can do. The other thing I like hearing about too is your use of community partners. Has that been a challenge, or has that been something that you found people are fairly willing to partner with you on?
Actually, very, very willing. And I've been overwhelmed with the responses. I really have been. And I work as well with a partner in my building who is part of our curriculum team, and she's also part of our STEAM team. And she is in charge of helping me with my community type contacts, and she's helped me build this network as well. And I actually have an advisory committee that meets at least twice a year, which we're going to be meeting virtually, of course, this year. But those people have really been a great network for me as well. And so it's just basically just been reaching out and just brainstorming, okay, who can I talk to? Where can I go? What can I do? Who do I know that knows this person? And just, I've always, and I tell my kids the same thing at school and talk about modeling. I always say, you know what? The worst thing somebody can say is no. And no is not a bad thing.
Right.
No just tells you have to keep trying, and you have to reimagine, and you have to keep going and figure out a way to make it happen. If you want it bad enough, you'll make it happen.
Wise words to share with your students for sure, and really to all of us. And I was just about to ask you what advice you'd have for teachers who are looking for community partners, but I think you already answered that. Use your networking skills, right?
Yes.
Reach out to people that you already know, and then ask people who may know someone that could benefit. And I think so many times we are afraid to ask because we're afraid someone will say no, but that's okay. As you said, it may not be the right time for them to help or be in their wheelhouse to do that, but that's okay. There's somebody else. So you never know unless you ask. So thanks for those. Thanks for modeling that for us, and being an inspiration for those teachers who may be listening that are facing similar circumstances. You may not teach family and consumer sciences, but you probably are teaching a subject in which you could use some community help in some way. Be it speakers to come in virtually. Speaking of that, I think what we're discovering is that with everyone becoming so adept at doing this, doing Zooms, Google Meets, Hangouts, and everything, that it may be a little easier to get someone to connect with your class now. And I think that people do understand as educators the position that we're all in, and I do think people are more willing to help. So I highly encourage you to reach out to those people in your community that could be of assistance in your classroom some way, whether it's just like a speaker series or for donations, as in Jay's case. So While we're talking about Imagineering your classroom, I'm reminded of one of Walt's favorite quotes of mine. He says, "We keep moving forward around here, opening up new doors and doing new things because we're curious. And curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. We're always exploring and experimenting. We call it Imagineering, the blending of creative imagination with technical know-how." So with that said, you had a long and successful career in education, Jay, and I'm just wondering, what aspects of education do you think need to be Imagineered or re-imagineered? You've given a great example of your classroom, but if I gave you Tinkerbell's wand and you could reimagine anything else that we have in education, what would it be?
Definitely more hands-on experiences. And you did mention the ability now to be able to bring speakers in. And I think that that is incredibly, incredibly valuable because kids do learn not just from their teachers, but they also learn from the community. And so I do feel that schools need to be more of a community entity. It's been for so long, I feel that the schools have been this part of the community, and then there's the rest of the community. So there's the business professionals, and then there's the school. But we're all in it together.
Right.
You know, there's so many ways that we can build a community for our children by partnering with each other more and more, and by eliminating some of the, and I hate to say it, but some of these standardized testing, and because kids, they don't test well. You look at a kid on any specific day, they could be bringing so much emotional baggage with them to school. You look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If they didn't eat that morning, if they left the house and their parents were arguing, I don't care what it was. If you give them a high stakes test on a day where those kids are dealing with anything, it is not a true reflection of what that child is actually capable of.
Right.
So I feel that we need so many more different types of evaluations, different types of assessments that really kind of more than triangulate these skills in these kids and really show what they can do and highlight the positives in what these kids are able to do, because there's so many different types of learners. And so, yeah, so I that's a very convoluted way to answer your question.
That's a great way.
Bringing technology into it is a big thing. I've brought so much technology into even my textiles classes, and being imaginative with even like the Clever Touch, using that in my textiles classes. It's just letting kids have the opportunity to be creative and play, just play with stuff, figure it out.
Oh man, you are speaking to my heart when you say those words about just encouraging people to play. Even adults, we don't play enough, you know.
No.
But especially with kids, it's kind of like we drum the play out of them, and that's where we really learn creative problem solving, is through play. So if you haven't listened to episode 10 of the podcast, that was last week's episode with Angela Stockman, and you want to learn more about play, please listen to that, because she's pretty much echoing what Jay is talking about, is the importance of play and just letting kids have some time to use their hands and to think outside the box. And that is not wasted time whatsoever, is it?
No, not at all. And, you know, and that's one thing that I've definitely learned over the years, is that lesson plans are exactly that. They're just plans. They're very rough estimates of what you think you might want to do that day. And, you know, I'm constantly turning in revised lesson plans, because there are days where I do not get to half of the things that I want to get to on my lesson plan. And that's just fine, because the learning is what's important, and you can't necessarily put a timer on learning.
Beautifully said, and completely agree. So let me ask you this. You know, we've talked about some of the challenges that we've faced so far this school year, and since last March, when we've taken so much learning online. What's your greatest hope for this school year, Jay?
I think my greatest hope for this school year is just to allow kids and teachers to know that we're all in it together. And I think that we've really accomplished a lot of that. At least in my district, I really feel that we have, that there's more of a sense of family in that these kids feel that they can come to any teacher anytime and, basically not necessarily pour their hearts out, but just that they know that they have a support system that's there. And so I really just hope that that continues. And like I said, I'm very blessed, very fortunate in my school district. And I know that there are a lot of school districts that network is just not there. And I hope that if nothing else, that this global crisis can somehow bring us all together to really celebrate humanity.
Amen and amen. That's, again, beautifully said. I keep hearing you come back to the community aspect of schooling, of education. And I think you told me that your high school, Triway, is only 480 some odd students, something like that?
Mm-hmm. And that's even including our vocational students. We were supposed to have around 450 start in the building this year.
Okay. I went to a high school of about 380 many years ago, and that was a small town. There was very much an atmosphere of that we're all in this together. There was complete community support for our learning. And those who may be listening that do not have that experience of teaching in such a small setting, and you may be teaching in a school of 3,000. I was a principal of a school, or assistant principal in a school that had, we had 2,500 students when I left. And back when we had just, I guess, right around 2,000, we created a smaller learning community within that school called a Freshman Academy. And I was the principal of the Freshman Academy. And it was a way to take a large school and break down into a smaller one to create this school within a school, this smaller learning community. And we'll need to do an episode on smaller learning communities in the future, because they're highly valuable. Because essentially what we did is we took that very large high school and broke it down into a high school of really around 300. I think we had 395 my first year. And by the time I left as the principal of the academy, we had, I think, 500. But still, 500 is a lot smaller than 2,500. And it's that individual attention. It's that individual focus on the needs of the students that makes such a valuable difference. And so don't think that you can't bring the community in, you can't create smaller communities as well within large settings. And so stay tuned. We'll have another episode, I promise, in the future on that. But I hadn't thought about doing that, Jay, so I appreciate you mentioning that, because
Absolutely.
that community value is so important. And honestly, that's something that Disney, when Walt created Disneyland, if you go back and look at his dedication for from the opening day of Disneyland, he talks about creating a place where adults and children can enjoy one another's company, where sometimes it would be a school, literally. He's talking about a place of learning, and sometimes it would be a community center. And one thing that Walt really understood, I think, for what he was after, was the value of community and interaction between children and adults. And I think it's very important for us in this midst of COVID and these very trying times, is that we try to create as much community as possible, that we really focus on giving them some type of stability, and you can do that through community. And understand too, I had a very wise professor once say that every child needs an adult advocate, and that adult advocate may not be the parent. And we just know that's a reality, unfortunately. I've really found, over the years, I've found great value in that, in trying to explain to young teachers especially, or any teacher, that you may be the only advocate that child has. And so keep that in mind when you're working with these kids. So
true.
Yeah.
So true. That's very profound. And, you made me think about when I was first teaching my second job. I actually started at a very rural high school my very first year, taught there for 1 year. I had strived to be at Triway, and I actually have a story. So put a pin in that if you don't mind hearing my story.
I'd love to.
But
Go ahead.
I taught we'll come back to my Triway story. But I taught in a school that was a comprehensive high school, and it was inner city, and there were 2,000 kids in this high school. And what I found, as you were saying, is that a lot of these kids, they just didn't have an adult that they could even count on in their lives. Right. And so I had gone through a class in college that I remembered very, very specifically saying, take the kid that you think is going to be the troublemaker and give them responsibility. And so my very first day of that school, I had a study hall, and I heard the stories about this one kid, and I made him my gopher. I made him my student aide, basically. And I watched that kid blossom over the course of that school year. And those kids at that school were dealing with very different types of problems than a lot of kids in other districts are dealing with because of the inner city socioeconomic types of issues. So when I finally got to Triway, people said, oh, you used to teach at such and such a school. I'm sure you're so happy to be at Triway. The kids are probably so much better. And I said, better is not the word I would use. They're different. They have different needs. They're unique. And it's just trying to find how to relate to that uniqueness that is sometimes the biggest challenge.
For those who may have ever heard the term used, those kids, you know, that's something that really just kind of sticks in my craw. You know, when we're talking about those kids, well, I would always ask, what do you mean those kids? Those kids are kids. Those kids that may act out, anybody who acts out often is usually doing so because they don't have a need being met. So do you actually have enough empathy to discern what that unmet need is? And as educators, that's what we're called to do. We're not called to teach a curriculum. We're called to influence lives. Now, I know that's not for everyone. Some people get into this because it's a job, and that's they think they're there to teach the curriculum. But I think if you're called to change lives in a positive way. And so in order to do that, we have to have empathy for all of the students that we teach. And we have to understand that if there are any issues that are going on, there's some root cause to that. And that's for adults as well. You know, I love to hear beautiful stories like yours when you actually are looking every way that you can to provide support for those kids. And it can be in just the simplest way. Give them the responsibility because they've never been given that responsibility, or they've never had an adult show that they are trusted to have responsibility, you know? So that's beautiful, Jay. So what's your Triway story?
Okay, so I have to tell this really, really quickly. So my husband and I were high school sweethearts, and I tell my kids this story too. And I say, we were high school sweethearts, and then I wait. I say, okay, let's try that again. We were high school sweethearts. Okay. So then we get that out of the way. Yeah. So then we grew up in a different community. And so my husband actually and his brother bought a dairy farm down here in this area. And so I knew eventually we were going to be here in Triway. And so I took the first job that I took knowing that I wasn't going to stay. I took the second job driving 50 minutes one way. And even during those 3 years, my first job when I interviewed at Triway, the principal that was there at the time, he said, oh, well, we don't have an opening right now, but, you know, keep putting in your application. We'll keep your application. So then the following year, I was still at my inner city school. It was towards the end of the year, and I decided to go back and see the principal again and say, hey, you know, you've got somebody that's nearing retirement. What's her plans? What is she doing? And he said, well, we don't know anything yet. And so it was a Friday afternoon, and I just decided, you know what, I'm going to walk down the hallway to where I know that the foods lab is in the school. And I'm just going to kind of walk around, which of course you can't do that these days, but
right. It was a different time, guys.
I know, right. It was like, we're talking like the early 90s here. Yep. So I walked down the hallway, and I thought, okay, there's no way that this door is going to be open on a Friday, you know, like the teacher was gone already. So I wiggled the doorknob. Lo and behold, it was open. So I walked in. I didn't touch anything, you know, out of respect. I didn't move anything like that. But there's a demo table in the front of the foods lab. And I went to the front of that demo table and I stood at that demo table and I looked out over that classroom and I said, this will be mine. I kid you not. And then the following year, I got a phone call from the principal and he said, hey, she's retiring, but guess what? So am I. But I'm giving your name to the principal that's taking over and they want to interview you. So once again, as they say, the rest is history. And I was just standing at that demo table today, as a matter of fact, doing my kitchen demo.
That's such an amazing story. You know, my wife would say to that, you spoke it into existence.
Yes.
You know, that you actually put it out there and believed in your heart that this is something that you really wanted and you were blessed with the opportunity to have it. But first of all, you had to have the faith that this is something that you could claim for yourself and that this was going to be yours. And so that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that. That's an amazing story, Jay.
Well, thank you for allowing me to share that because it's a fun story for me. I love being able to share it. So thank you.
Oh, no, that's awesome. So Jay, like me, you're a big Star Wars fan. That's actually how we met is through Star Wars in the Classroom. And I'm so grateful that you plugged in with us. But you've used that passion to varying degrees in your classroom. What advice would you offer teachers about bringing their own personal passions into their teaching?
Well, the first thing that I would say is that I feel that kids relate to teachers who are real people. And
good.
We all have different passions and we all have things that we love to do, not only at school, but in our spare time that is very important to us. And so, you know, that's one thing when I first started teaching was I was kind of afraid to show that side of myself. That I remember the pedagogy when I was in college was you don't smile till Christmas, right?
Oh,
you don't let them see, you know, I mean, you put on that face, that stern face. And, you know, and there is something to be said. Obviously, kids need structure. They need guidance. They need rules. Kids want rules. But the way that you present those rules makes all the difference.
Amen.
And it's so funny because just the other day, I have on my personal Google for school, you know, my school Google. Several years ago, this child has since graduated, probably 8 or 10 years ago. She had taken the paint program and she took my picture from the yearbook and she really lovingly drew Yoda ears on me. And she put me into a Jedi robe and she put me on a starry background. And that became my Google profile picture. And it has not changed since then. And just the other day in my college and career readiness class, we were talking about being professional. And we were talking about how the kids want to create a professional email so that when they go off to college, it's not like Pookie Bear 123, you know, or something like that. And so I was saying, you know, I'm really kind of thinking about changing my profile picture. And the kids were all like, no, don't do it. We love that. And I said, yeah, but you know, sometimes like parents and other professionals. And the one girl goes, my mom just loves it. She said, I can see why you love Mrs. Krebs because of this. So, you know, it's one of those things I feel that when you're passionate about something, it really does evoke a sense of role modeling to those kids that it's okay to be true to who you are.
Right.
It's okay to be excited about the things that make you excited and to bring that into your teaching as well. I mean, I'm making Star Wars references every single day. It doesn't matter what I'm teaching or about what I'm teaching. And even just today, a kid had brought me one of the child hand sanitizers from Walmart because they just happened to say, hey, I was at Walmart the other day and I saw this and I thought of you and I picked it up.
Yeah. You know, that's something that every teacher, I think, would like to have that kind of connection with a kid, that they are outside the class and said, hey, I thought of you. I thought of you because I care enough to do something to support your passion. And so that's cool. I have to ask, was that the Baby Yoda hand sanitizer?
It was.
Oh, I haven't found, I don't have one yet. That's all good. It's all good. You know, I need to show you sometime, Jay. Maybe if I find it, I'll put it on Twitter on Stars in the Classroom. But I had a student cut out a picture of me or I guess she maybe photocopied it or something. It was an art class. She was a good artist, but got one of my yearbook pictures and put my head on a Yoda body with the ears and everything and the robes and painted my face green and had the little green lightsaber and everything. And that stayed on my door for like Mr. Riddle's classroom. That was my, like, this is Riddle's class for many years. So
that's perfect.
Yeah. So I had a very similar Yoda. Maybe they're saying something about our wisdom. We'd like to think, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yoda being the ultimate teacher.
That's right.
And, and I don't stop with just talking about it either. There's almost every single day I'm wearing something Star Wars. I don't care if it's shoes, if it's a dress, if it's a pillowcase that I turned into a shirt or a skirt. And, the kids will say, where do you find this stuff, Mrs. Krebs? And so it really gives me an opportunity to say, hey, I made it. Or, hey, here's this really great website that you should check out if you like this kind of stuff. And they see that I'm not afraid to be me.
Right. That's brilliant. And let me ask you this then. Last question before we go. And I'm really going to have you back on if you don't mind, because we could just talk forever about some of these topics. And I love your heart for your students. And I think I want to do a future episode about having heart. How do you develop empathy for students? And I think you'd have a lot to share for that. But last question here. If you could travel back in time and give advice to yourself as you entered your first year of teaching, what would that advice be?
Probably something that I'm still not doing enough of today, and that is take time for you during the school day. Eat your lunch.
Yes.
Go home before 6 o'clock in the
Yes.
evening,
Yes,
But
yes.
no, seriously, my very first year, I was so concentrated on planning the perfect lesson, on trying to orchestrate exactly what I thought the school day was going to be like. And I would really beat myself up over, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind, or, I should be teaching this curriculum this way at this time. And yes, I understand that there are standards that we have to teach and we have to hit those standards. But I've found that my way of teaching them is not as I hate to say the word as structured, because I'm a very structured teacher. I mean, my kids will tell you that I have a lot of structure in my classroom. But just to not beat yourself up over the small things and take time for you. You have to sharpen the saw. You have to, as the oxygen mask falls down, you have to put it on yourself before you can help your kids too. Right. And sometimes I think I was putting myself last because I wanted to put my kids first so much, which is a great thing in theory. But in practice, if your batteries aren't charged, you're not bringing anything with you.
Wow, that's profound. What a great way to end. You just stepped on my toes though too, for sure. Put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you put it on someone else. You have to take care of yourself. You need self-care. And those of us who have been in education for any length of time, or even if you're a new teacher and you're very, you're brand new to this, if you're in it for the right reasons and you're passionate about what you're doing, as Jay said, it's so easy to put your kids first, which they should be there, but you can burn yourself out very quickly. And I've been in that place before in my professional career. So great words, Jay. Great words of advice. I appreciate you sharing those. So Jay, if people wanted to follow up and follow you, I know you have you're out there in the Twitterverse and you have different socials that they could follow you on. And I highly recommend, folks, when Jay's talking about those clothes that she makes, that she wears to work, you need to follow her just to see her wardrobe, because it's amazing, the creativity, the things that she does with that. So what's the best way for people to follow your work, Jay?
Well, first of all, thank you for the wonderful compliments. I appreciate that. But you can actually follow me on a few different platforms. Personally, I am at Joyce Krebs on Twitter. I also have a Twitter through my school, which is at Krebs Class. So it's KREBS. KLASS, sorry, English teachers. And it's the same thing actually on Instagram. So my Instagram for school is where I post all of my adventures in my family and consumer sciences classroom and with FCCLA and all the leadership and community service that we do. So those two there. And I also have a YouTube channel that I am currently working on, and it's called Krebsy's Kitchen. So don't judge me, because there's a really old video on there right now, but I'm going to be updating that one. with more demos as the kids are going to be able to do some at-home labs. You can also find my Star Wars podcast at Podcast Stardust. So we are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Podcast Stardust. And you can find Dennis Keithley, my co-host, and I 3 times a week on the RetroZap Podcast Network. So we do news, reviews, and discussion. And I also do a once a month roundup of Star Wars fashion and lifestyle products on our World Between Worlds segment. So Dennis and I have a load of fun over there talking Star Wars and just, again, doing the community thing over there. And that's how I sharpen the saw. Dennis and I call that our appointment Star Wars every Wednesday night. And that is our self-care. And that's how we take care of ourselves.
That's fun.
So I can be re-energized for the next day.
As I said, folks, Jay's very passionate about what she does, and she pours herself into it with her family and her students. And I think that you'd really benefit following her work. Dennis is awesome. I'm glad that you guys are teamed up together for RetroZap. And just keep on doing great work, not only just in your classroom, but in fandom as well, because you guys do a lot of great work out there. Bring a lot of positivity, which is needed right now for sure. So
thank you. We do try.
And you succeed at it. So with that, guys, I'd like to say thanks for joining our show today. If you'd like to learn more about our work, including our workshops, webinars, speaking engagements, and more, visit our website at imagineeringedu.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at ImagineeringEd, and on Facebook at Imagineering Education. We hope you'll also subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. And when you do so, don't forget to leave a review. So until next time, remember, there's a great, big, beautiful tomorrow just a dream away. Be blessed, everyone.